The Christian Conquest. Every god on trial but one. 6. Intellectual liberalism and the boundary revelation will not cross. Pre-Christian Greece and Rome were no utopia of free thought. Socrates died at the hands of fellow Greeks, and Roman emperors censored and killed philosophers centuries before the first church existed. But Greek and Roman philosophy preserved something structurally precious: a plurality of rival schools, Platonists, Stoics, Epicureans, Skeptics, arguing about nature and ethics, with no single book holding the legally enforced final word. Christianity closed that space by declaring certain conclusions not merely mistaken, but forbidden, on pain of eternity. Once a final revelation had been entrusted to an authorized church, doubt stopped being an intellectual error and became rebellion against the creator of the universe. A philosopher could simply be wrong and walk away. A heretic endangered souls, and souls, once weaponized, justified force in a way no mere argument ever could. That single distinction, inquiry revises itself, revelation refuses to, is the entire difference between an open civilization and a closed one. And Christianity paid for enforcing the closed version with some of its own best minds. The same reflex that shuttered the Athenian Academy in 529 burned Giordano Bruno alive in Rome in 1600 for speculating, among other heresies, that the universe might contain infinite worlds. Galileo stood before the Roman Inquisition in 1633, faced the formal threat of torture, was forced to abjure heliocentrism, and spent his remaining years under house arrest because the Church had made one cosmology scripturally untouchable. They were Christian and post-Christian Europeans, broken by the identical machine that broke Hypatia 12 centuries earlier. An unwelcome claim, a tribunal with no interest in falsifiable argument, and fire or house arrest as the closing rebuttal. Christian scholastics still produced real brilliance. Augustine, Aquinas, Abelard, Occam, Erasmus, and medieval universities built genuine institutions for structured argument. It proves brilliance survives inside any well-resourced civilization, fenced or not, and a fenced mind is not a free one merely because the fence is expensively built. Christian Europe did eventually produce real toleration and freedom of conscience, mostly by exhausting itself in a century of religious war and conceding at gunpoint that no single sect could safely hold total power over anyone's conscience, including its own believers. 7. The signboard trick. Temples and universities, inherited, not invented. The Pantheon in Rome, a temple to every Roman god, became a Christian church in 609 CE and still stands as one. The sign changed, the stone untouched. The Parthenon became a Byzantine church, then a Catholic cathedral, then an Ottoman mosque, spending most of its post-classical life wearing someone else's religion like a coat 2 sizes too big. Pope Gregory the Great made the method a written policy. In a 601 CE letter to the missionary Mellitus, he ordered that English temples not be destroyed but purified, their festivals kept on the exact same dates in the exact same places, simply rededicated to Christian saints instead of the old gods. It is a pope, in his own hand, instructing his missionaries to keep the building, keep the calendar, keep the crowd's habit of showing up, and swap only the sign over the door. Because rebranding a population is cheaper and faster than building one from scratch. Christians built the universities of Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, true, and beside the point this essay is making, which is about what those universities were built to teach. The Aristotelian logic Aquinas fused into Christian theology reached the medieval West through several channels at once. Through Averroes, a Muslim philosopher in Cordoba, and Maimonides, a Jewish philosopher, both from traditions Christianity spent centuries trying to convert or suppress, and through direct Greek to Latin translation, including William of Morbecca's work, commissioned by Aquinas' own Dominican order, specifically because the Arabic-derived versions in circulation were judged imprecise. The Greek manuscripts Morbecca translated were themselves survivals of a pagan philosophical tradition Christianity had spent 1,000 years trying to suppress, kept alive in Byzantine libraries by scribes copying pagan philosophy long after the empire called itself Christian, and the commentary tradition that shaped how the West first learned to read that philosophy had been built by scholars the Christian world regarded as infidels. Convert a population? Wait 3 or 4 generations for the old gods to fade into bedtime stories, then stamp every subsequent achievement of that population's descendants with the brand of whichever religion happened to be standing over them when the achievement occurred. The mathematics, the philosophy, the architecture, borrowed capacity, redirected labor, logic imported from traditions the institution had tried to destroy or convert, folded into one word: Christendom, as if the word itself had done the thinking. It stood over the people who did the thinking, took credit for the synthesis, and kept the sign. December 25th sits on or near pre-Christian Roman solar observances, and specialists still argue over the exact causal chain connecting the two. What isn't in serious dispute is that the date was not revealed from anywhere. It was set by a church operating inside a solar calendar it did not invent. Easter's own English name descends from Eostra, a Germanic spring goddess. The name survives only in English and the other Germanic languages, since most Christian languages instead use a word descended from Pascha, and the 8th century monk Bede is the only ancient source who mentions her at all. So this is Bede's testimony, not an established universal fact. Even on the more cautious reading, a civilization does not need new holidays when it can graft itself onto the old ones and let 3 generations do the work of forgetting for it. 8. The Americas: cross, crown, and cultural genocide. Disease killed on a scale no missionary planned, and not every Christian who made the crossing was complicit. Bartolomé de las Casas turned into Christianity's own fiercest prosecutor of Spanish cruelty, and his testimony belongs in this essay precisely because it proves the crime was visible to contemporaries, not a modern invention read backward into innocent history. Diego de Landa, a Franciscan bishop, organized the mass burning of Maya codices at Mani in 1562, convinced he was fighting demons. Because of one man's bonfire, humanity lost the overwhelming majority of the written record of an entire civilization. And today, only 4 Maya codices are known to survive anywhere on Earth. The requerimiento, a Spanish legal document read aloud in Spanish to people who spoke no Spanish, demanded submission to church and crown on pain of war and enslavement, and its recitation was treated as sufficient legal cover for whatever violence followed, whether or not a single listener understood one word of it. Conquest wearing a due process costume is still conquest. In the Andes, 17th century colonial authorities ran the extirpación de idolatrias for over 100 years after the conquest was supposedly complete. Inspectors combed villages, smashed huacas, tortured religious specialists into confession, and compelled public conformity generation after generation. Proof this was never a single event finished at first contact, but an industry, restaffed and refunded every time the old religion refused to die on schedule. The US government banned the Sundance in 1904 and crushed the ghost dance movement, culminating in the massacre of as many as 300 Lakota men, women, and children at Wounded Knee in 1890. From the 1870s onward, the federal government and Christian denominations jointly operated boarding schools explicitly designed, in founder Richard Henry Pratt's own words, to kill the Indian in him and save the man. Children stripped of language, hair, name, and ceremony by design, not by accident. The U.S. Department of the Interior's own 2022-2024 investigation identified 417 such federal institutions and documented deaths and unmarked graves on their grounds. Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission used a term that names precisely what this essay has been describing all along: cultural genocide, the deliberate destruction of a people's continuity as a distinct culture, achieved while leaving the individual child's body alive and killing everything inherited inside it instead. This was not a uniform machine. Nahua scribes in central Mexico took the alphabet the friars brought and used it to preserve their own histories on their own terms. And Jesuit reductions in Brazil sometimes shielded Guarani communities from settler slave raiders, even while disciplining their labor and suppressing their ceremonies. California's Franciscan missions show where the same logic ends when carried to its furthest point. Not merely new belief, but reorganized labor, residence, family, and name, an architecture of assimilation operating under the label of salvation. Education became domination the moment it required a child to despise his mother's language. Religion became conquest the moment salvation required the death of memory. 9. Why Jesus gets a pass. Jesus is not literally immune from historical examination. Scholars argue endlessly over authorship, dating, and the gap between the itinerant preacher and the later theological Christ. The immunity lives somewhere else entirely, in the assumption, held by hundreds of millions of otherwise reasonable people, that the examination must never be permitted to land on a negative verdict. Jesus is examined across most of the Western world under social conditions in which the ultimate answer is presumed settled by God before the historian has opened a single page. The Mediterranean of the first century was already crowded with savior figures who died and returned. Osiris was mourned and ritually restored in Egypt for millennia before Bethlehem existed on any map. Attis, consort of the goddess Cybele, was a Phrygian dying and returning god whose cult was thriving in Rome itself in the very centuries the Gospels were being written, complete with an annual public mourning followed by public resurrection. Mithras commanded an active Roman mystery cult built on salvation and initiation, popular with soldiers across the empire at the same time Christianity was recruiting among slaves and the poor. Adonis had his own resurrection cult in the Levant, close enough to Judea that no interpreter was required to hear the story. Scholars genuinely disagree about how tightly these figures fit a single, dying and rising God template. Jonathan Z. Smith argued influentially that much of this category was itself a 19th century Protestant invention, retrofitted onto antiquity to explain Christianity away, and that Osiris in particular never rises in quite the sense the parallel requires. Other serious scholars, including Mettinger, have pushed back and defended the pattern as real, ancient, and pre-Christian. If Smith is right, that only removes one argument against Christian uniqueness. It does not supply a single new argument for it. The claim that Jesus' resurrection was a real, unrepeatable event in history still needs its own independent evidence, the same evidence any other miracle claim would need, and a weaker Osiris parallel isn't it. If Mettinger is closer to right, Jesus arrived into a marketplace already selling a version of this story, and calling only his version history requires evidence capable of distinguishing it from every rival sacred narrative on offer at the time, and the surviving sources do not meet that burden. Ask honestly why the Jewish carpenter's version of a story already circulating in the region is treated as fact and the others are treated as fable. And the only answer that survives contact with the sources is the one this essay keeps arriving at. Not proof, but who was still standing 3 centuries later with the power to write the verdict and call it revelation. If supernatural claims about Isis, Odin, or Quetzalcoatl require evidence, so do supernatural claims about Jesus in full, with no discount for incumbency. A cross above the courthouse does not move the burden of proof 1 inch, and criticism is not persecution. Reason asks for evidence and lets people answer for themselves. Dogma announces the verdict in advance and has spent 2,000 years using power to silence anyone who asks to see the working. 10. The charges. If Aztec religion is superstition for claiming the sun needed blood, transubstantiation, a wafer becoming literal human flesh, earns the identical word, with no institutional exemptions stamped on the paperwork. Read the charges plainly, because a list concentrates what a paragraph lets you skim past. And this time, name the actor doing each one, instead of hiding behind one collective noun. The record is concrete. Christian emperors closed academies, episcopal mobs destroyed sanctuaries and murdered Hypatia. Frankish law threatened Saxons with death for ancestral rights. Crusading orders extinguished old Prussian religion and language. Spanish clergy burned Maya memory, and American governments joined Christian denominations in suppressing indigenous religion and schooling children out of their inheritance. A tradition unafraid of scrutiny does not need a statute threatening death for the wrong funeral rite, or a bureaucracy refunded generation after generation to keep hunting a religion that refuses to expire on schedule. Every coercive statute, burned manuscript, demolished shrine, and stolen child is a confession written by the hand that committed the crime. An argument that is winning does not need a sword. Yet, at decisive stages, Christian governments and institutions used law, armies, economic pressure, schooling, and control of memory to make their theology everyone else's obligation. Notice finally what this essay is not saying. It does not accuse every believer alive today, and it does not deny the sincerity, kindness, or courage of countless individual Christians across 2,000 years. A descendant does not inherit personal guilt for what an institution did in the 4th century or the 16th. And this indictment is aimed at the institution and its historiography, not at the person in the pew who never harmed anyone. But the institution does not get to hide behind that person's innocence forever. Can the suppression of a people's gods, ceremonies, languages, and memory honestly be called civilization, merely because the suppressors also built beautiful buildings afterward on top of what they burned? My answer is no, and I have given you the sources. Let every religion be questioned, including the ones still sitting on the bench. Let every mythology be named mythology. The instant evidence fails to establish it. Christianity's included, with no exemption, no grace period, and no chaplain in the room to soften the verdict. Let every achievement receive its credit, and let every destruction enter the same ledger beside it, in the same ink. Let no cathedral conceal the temple beneath it, and let no university claim intellectual freedom while it still protects its own founding revelation from the exact test it applies to everyone else's gods. The yardstick was never the cross. The yardstick is reason, and reason does not stop at the church door just because the door is old, beautiful, and built on someone else's foundation. Visit www.reasonandrevolt.com for more information.